Kizamde, hop on the beat!
JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is a series quite well known for its flamboyant, high-fashion-inspired style, with its characters depicted in a way that is significantly more homoerotic than your standard shonen manga. Of course, the presence of LGBT themes in JoJo goes far beyond just its visual components, and the series has featured a long line of LGBT characters, and its creator, Hirohiko Araki, has directly mentioned the ways he was inspired by gay artists and designers. Last year, I made a video going over this, listing out some of Araki's notable influences and going over some of the series' most prominent LGBT characters. I intentionally didn't cover everything I could in that video, since the most recent iteration of JoJo, Part 9 The JoJo Lands, has been taking a much more direct approach to LGBT themes than before, and I suspected I would have some more to go over in that regard. That turned out to be the case, so I'm back to go over some more of the LGBT themes and characters in JoJo. I suggest watching the original video first since I go over a lot of the big ideas there, but to quickly recap, Araki's early art was heavily inspired by the work of the fashion illustrators Antonio Lopez and Tony Viramontes, two gay artists that explored their sexuality through their art, and which directly contributed to Araki's androgynous style. Araki's next big inspiration was of course fashion magazine photo shoots, where he would often depict his male characters in the poses and even outfits of female models. I also went over the fact that JoJo is far from the first LGBT manga, and went over some similar themes appearing in the works of Osamu Tezuka and others. And finally, I went down the list of the series' most well-known LGBT characters, with a big focus on Dio Brando. First, I'd like to follow up with some more of Araki's direct influences here. JoJo is a series that wears its inspirations on its sleeve, and just by reading it you get a clear snapshot of Araki's personal taste in art, movies, and most famously music. Those music references are the main thing I want to cover here, since the music industry is yet another place where we often see LGBT themes expressed. One clear influence on Araki's character designs is no doubt the glam rock artists of the 1970s, a subgenre of rock that often had performers dressing in feminine or androgynous styles, popularized by bands or artists like T-Rex, David Bowie, and Iggy Pop, all of which have been referenced in JoJo. David Bowie in particular would often perform as androgynous characters like Ziggy Stardust and Aladdin Sane. Dio's iconic design in Part 3 seems to have been directly inspired by one of these looks. And I think you can draw a direct line between Bowie's androgynous style and Araki's designs, particularly with characters like Anasui, who Araki said that he initially wanted to appear as a person beyond the concept of gender. In the last video, I pointed out that JoJo is far from the first manga to incorporate LGBT themes, and I mainly focused on some examples from the manga of Osamu Tezuka. Tezuka is sort of this all-encompassing figure in the manga world, and you're never going to find a manga that hasn't been influenced by him. But one creator I do think is relevant here, which I neglected to mention, is Go Nagai. Nagai kind of occupies the generation of mangaka immediately following Tezuka, but predating the creators that would pop up later like Araki or Akira Toriyama, and his manga were massively influential from the 70s onward. Araki doesn't have as many direct connections to Go Nagai as he does to Tezuka, but he has mentioned him before in an interview, in one of his most iconic creations, Mazinger Z, appears in the Bohemian Rhapsody arc. Anybody who knows Go Nagai obviously knows which manga I'm thinking about here, with what is possibly his most influential series, Devilman, also exploring LGBT themes before JoJo. This is something that would be greatly expanded on by future sequels and adaptations. But even in the original manga, Devilman was explicitly dealing with concepts of gender and sexuality. This can be seen most clearly with its villain Ryo, who I feel has a lot of overlap with Dio Brando, across his appearance, personality, and sexuality. Like the last video, I'd like to go over some more of the series' LGBT characters. I already covered most of the obvious ones, but I still think there's some interesting subtext to look at. One character who, while not explicit, definitely incorporates some queer tropes would be Speedwagon. Speedwagon is portrayed as having a great admiration for Jonathan, which is shown to stem from his code as a gentleman after he recognizes Jonathan's virtue. Over time, though, this morphs into a downright devotion for Jonathan that I absolutely think you could read as him being gay. When Jonathan was injured after the mansion fight, Speedwagon fought through his own injuries to visit him at his bedside, even saying that he would hold his unconscious hand to show his support. After Jonathan's death, he would continue to support his family into his old age. Something notable about Speedwagon is that he was never really shown to have any kind of love interest and was said to have never gotten married until he died. Now, Joseph did toy with the idea that he and Arena could have been a couple, but this was something that Arena quickly dismissed. Something I wasn't aware of before is that the phrase "he never married" was actually commonly used in obituaries to indicate that a person was gay. Sort of like the term confirmed bachelor, it was used in a time when it was taboo to directly state a gay person's sexuality. Its appearance in JoJo may not have been an accident and could be a direct allusion to Speedwagon having been gay. With the amount of explicit or heavily implied LGBT characters in the series, I also find it interesting to point out the times that Araki has actually gone out of his way to deconfirm things. In the last video, I spoke about Araki's interview with the yaoi manga expert Junko Kaneda, where they extensively discussed the yaoi reading of JoJo and the phenomenon of shipping characters. At one point here, Kaneda mentions Tiziano and Squalo, two characters drawn together in, let's just say, a very sensual way. When Kaneda mentions the two of them as a couple, Araki initially says that it's just due to the fashion aspect of the series and that they aren't established as a couple. Although right after this, when Kaneda mentions other characters drawn close together, he says he realizes that he may have been conscious of his female readers when choosing to put the characters so close together. Eventually he settles on saying that the villains like Tiziano and Squalo may indeed be a couple, but for members of the protagonist group, it would just be friendship, even if they're drawn together in a sort of erotic photoshoot way. He ends the thought by saying that he finds Kaneda's reading enjoyable and that he'd be lying if he said it didn't cross his mind while drawing the characters. This sort of aligns with a common phenomenon that's been part of the history of LGBT representation in media for decades, which is characters that aren't openly written as being LGBT, but are nonetheless queer-coded. This stemmed from restrictions on the portrayal of LGBT people in media in the early 20th century, with the only way to do so being through loopholes. Due to positive portrayals of homosexual characters being banned, villainous characters were some of the only ones allowed to express these traits. Some of the most famous examples of this can be seen in many of the Disney movie villains, where we often see male characters with more effeminate personalities. Notably, the character Ursula from The Little Mermaid was directly inspired by the drag queen performer Divine. While the fact that a large amount of representation is limited to villains is unfortunate, many of these types of characters have been embraced as icons by the LGBT community regardless. Getting back to JoJo, we can see much of the same thing with a good amount of Araki's LGBT characters being limited to villainous roles. Although when we start to get to the less explicitly stated reps like Speedwagon, or the sort of homoerotic relationships between the characters like Joseph and Caesar, we can see that JoJo's representation is a bit more open and well realized. Another character I want to take the time to go over is Foo Fighters. Obviously, FF is a bit of a special case since they aren't human, but rather a colony of plankton sharing one intellect. FF also inhabits the remnants of the body of Atro, a female prisoner. As a result, FF is referred to as female on some occasions, although these are really derived from Atro's gender, such as on her prisoner ID card. Here the FE denotes female, as opposed to the MA you'll find on characters like Weather Report. In reality though, FF's gender is fairly ambiguous. The JoJo Veller guidebook even refers to FF using the word kanojo, which would mean she, but fittingly places a question mark next to it. In Japanese, FF uses both masculine and feminine first-person pronouns. In their stand form, they use watashi, which is masculine, and after assuming human form, they use atashi, which is feminine, and fitting with Atro's identity. FF also continues using atashi after losing the Atro body and going back to a stand-like form. The English dub and subtitles generally use they/them for FF, which I think is a reasonable translation. Biologically, FF is actually multiple organisms, so funnily enough, they would also fit into the plural use of they. In real life, depending on the type of plankton, they may reproduce sexually, asexually, or both. Or they can even asexually multiply by budding and then its own copies can reproduce together. I'm not a marine biologist, so I can't really get into it more than that. But needless to say, I think this means that the answer to the question of what FF's gender is would be all of the above. Next, I wanted to go over some of the new developments regarding LGBT characters in JoJo since quite a lot has happened since my last video. In that video, I did briefly include an image of the characters Lem Shaban and Key West from the JoJo lands. but since they were only recently introduced at the time, I didn't want to go over them just yet. These two are introduced as employees of the park's overarching villain at the time, Aka Howler. However, we would later come to learn that the two of them have their own agenda, leading to them working against Howler, and they are shown to be a lesbian couple. They planned to steal the lava rock and acquire Howler's wealth, wishing to buy a house together, something we see them discuss through a series of lovey-dovey text messages. They were a pretty entertaining duo, even if most of their interaction comes from over the phone. They were both defeated but left alive by the protagonists, so I don't think it's entirely out of the question that they pop into the story again. Next, we have a revelation in a recent chapter regarding one of the main cast members, Usagi. The current story arc deals with the disappearance of Usagi's mother and sister after their family's money is stolen as a result of a cyber scam. Usagi shares with the group that his relationship with his mother isn't on good terms. When he was 14, he developed a crush on a guy friend from another school, and when he opened up to his mother about it, she had him placed in a correctional institution and has acted cold towards him ever since. With Usagi saying that he likes girls as well in this scene, it's made explicit here that he is bisexual, and was a victim of conversion therapy, an abusive practice of attempting to change a person's sexual orientation. I've said before that Usagi is one of my favorite characters of the new group, and that I was looking forward to him finally getting the spotlight. And I think Araki totally delivered on that front, with this storyline to start the JoJo Lands Act 2 being one of the best so far. Like he did with Dragona earlier in this part, Araki touches on some real serious issues with empathy while also not sugarcoating the oppression that real people go through. For the last character to go over, Part 9 has had some further developments regarding Dragona's gender identity. To recap a bit, Dragona was initially presented to us in the first chapter as a character who is gender non-conforming. Most of what we learn about Dragona comes from their younger brother Jojo's narration. Jojo still refers to Dragona as his brother, but notes that they love women's fashion and has received cosmetic injections to their chest. That's pretty much all we had to go on for a while until the 13th chapter, where we saw Dragona bullied and sexually harassed by their classmates. In my last video, I went over a few possible interpretations of Dragona's identity. One, and the most apparent one, is that Dragona is a trans woman. The other is that Dragona is a character meant to be androgynous and beyond the standard definition of gender, which Araki previously attempted to do with the character Anasui. Although I don't think that same idea completely fits, since Dragona specifically presents as feminine. The last one is that Araki may be making reference to Mahu, a third gender found in some native Hawaiian cultures, which may fit with the story's setting. As I went over before, I lean towards Dragona being a trans woman, since I feel like that's just the most obvious takeaway from what is clearly a feminine presenting character. In the newest chapter, we actually got some more information I think supports my position. The group comes under attack by a stand ability which takes the form of a spirit that speaks from behind them, bringing up painful memories from their past to try and get them to turn around. When Dragona is affected by this ability, we learn about their first love, a wealthy ex-boyfriend that Dragona stole money from to fund cosmetic jaw surgery. Later, we see a flashback of Jojo confronting the boyfriend to retrieve a pendant that Dragona had left behind. In this scene, Jojo refers to Dragona as his brother, as he normally does. However, Dragona's ex directly refers to her as a woman. Like I went over last time, Japanese doesn't really have the same use of pronouns as English, so words like he and she aren't much of a common thing, and you can't really derive gender just from the speech. So while the English translation of the manga will use certain pronouns for Dragona, they aren't actually present in the original text, and so they must be derived from context. Dragona uses the first-person pronoun atashi, which is feminine, but not exclusively used by women. Since Jojo refers to Dragona as his brother in Japanese, the English translation has Jojo use he/him. So far, there hadn't been another character that directly stated otherwise. The only exception is Howler, who referred to Dragona as a woman, although this was simply based on appearance. This example is different, since this is someone who is romantic and implied to have been intimate with Dragona, specifically referring to Dragona using the word onna, plainly meaning woman. This, and the fact that Dragona was said to have undergone facial feminization surgery, I think all but directly states that Dragona is a trans woman. That's about everything I have to talk about for now. Obviously, I was looking forward to covering the new character-related stuff here, but I'm also glad I got to look into some of the more thematic and meta elements. Just like last time, let me know in the comments what your favorite aspect of JoJo's LGBT rep is, and if there's anything you think I missed this time. I definitely think I'll make another one of these next year, so I'm open to any suggestions for interesting topics to go over. If you want to stay updated on new videos, make sure to subscribe and click the notification bell. You can also join the Hum and Beat Discord to be notified on any new uploads and important JoJo news. Finally, I'd appreciate if you help support the channel on Patreon or by becoming a YouTube member. All supporters get featured in the credits and can submit viewer questions. This video's question comes from Risotto's Goth Titties. They ask why in Part 5, Formaggio's stand is named Little Feet spelled F-E-E-T instead of being spelled F-E-A-T like the band it's referencing. I think this just comes down to either Araki choosing to tweak the name for whatever reason or through some kind of small error between the Japanese and English. As the comment points out, both names use the same katakana and sound the same, so it may just be a bit of a mistranslation. On the other hand, Araki has actually altered the names of his references before and since. Famously, the name Zeppeli is altered from the band's name Led Zeppelin. In Part 5, the stand Kraftwerk is also written differently compared to the band. More recently, Araki has also had some stand names be altered by adding in an extra word, like with Love Love Deluxe, or Howler's stand, which we recently learned is named Eclipse 8. So I think sometimes Araki decides to get a bit creative instead of just directly copying the names. If you want to leave a question, you can join the Patreon or membership at any tier. On Patreon, you can leave your question in the community chat located on the left side of the site, or through a direct message. And on YouTube, you can leave it in the members-only community post. I try to answer one question in each of my videos, so you're welcome to ask as many as you want. Thank you for watching. This is the part of the video where I thank my $5 and up patrons and members. Thank you to Doorbell, Crayon, RigoVids, Pumpkin Doge, Sponge Cake, Kekext, Feliciano Rabaja, Christian McDonough, Pulse Dog, Rob Goliath, Big T, Gold, Red Hot Mayonnaise, Zenkai, Keenan, Saint Bobo, John Garcia, Crank and Plank, Fran Studios, Shin Megami Tensei Film Reviews, Griffiono, Fiddlehead, Justice, Joao Marchins, Danilo K, Kali, Javier's Milk, Billy the Corgi, Time Lord, Moist Daddy Tom, Daisuke, Artist 9398, Monkey 15, and Conti Goat.